There are moments in aviation that exist outside the boundaries of what the human mind will accept as real. July 9th, 1991, above the Indian Ocean. Lieutenant Keith Gallagher is no longer inside his aircraft. He is on top of it. His ejection seat fired without him touching the handle. The seat punched through the plexiglass canopy and jammed, half out, half in, suspended above the cockpit of a flying jet at over 200 miles per hour. His parachute deployed, caught the wind, and wrapped itself around the tail of his own aircraft. His helmet was gone. His oxygen mask was gone. He could not breathe. And 4 inches to his left, separated by a frame of shattered glass, his pilot could do nothing but watch. This is the story of Lizard 515, and the 6 minutes that should have killed 2 men. To understand why this accident was not just physically catastrophic, but uniquely psychologically devastating, you need to understand one very specific thing about the machine. The Grumman A-6 Intruder is not a glamorous aircraft. It is wide, stubby, built with the aesthetic of a blunt instrument. In its KA-6D tanker configuration, the variant flying that day, its job was simple: orbit above the carrier and pump fuel into other aircraft. But the Intruder has one design feature that makes it completely unique among combat jets of its era. The pilot and the Bombardier-Navigator do not sit in tandem, one behind the other. They sit side by side, shoulder to shoulder, 4 inches apart. That decision was made for practical reasons: better coordination, easier communication during low-level night strikes. On the morning of July 9, 1991, it meant that Lieutenant Mark Baden would spend 6 minutes with an unobstructed view of something no human being should ever have to witness from inside a cockpit. The USS Abraham Lincoln was 4 days out of Singapore, transiting the Indian Ocean toward the Persian Gulf. Squadron VA-95, the Green Lizards, had aircraft cycling through the tanker pattern, routine work. At the controls of Lizard 515 was Lieutenant Mark Baden, 27. Beside him, not behind him, but right beside him, was Lieutenant Keith Gallagher, also 27. And in a detail that never stops being brutal, it was Gallagher's 26th birthday. They had a minor technical problem. A drop tank had stopped transferring fuel. The fix was textbook: apply gentle -G to shake the valve loose. NATOPS approved, completely standard. Baden pushed the stick forward, just enough to float them in their seats. That was all it took. For Keith Gallagher, there was no warning, no caution light, no half-second to brace. One moment, the gentle float of -G. The next, a bang. And then wind. Not wind like opening a car window. Wind like being hit by a wall that never stopped moving. The Martin Baker ejection seat had fired itself. A fatigue crack in the top latch mechanism, the single component anchoring his seat to the cockpit structure, had grown invisible and catastrophic over years of accumulated G-load stress. One push of the stick, the crack gave. The seat fired, punched through the canopy, and jammed. The rocket motor never completed its cycle. He was wedged in place, half inside, half above the cockpit, facing directly into the full force of the slipstream. Then, the automatic ejection sequence continued, blind to the fact that he wasn't clear. His parachute deployed, billowed out, and wrapped itself around the tail. It cinched him to the aircraft like a rope. At over 200 knots, the dynamic wind pressure against an exposed body is measured in hundreds of pounds per square foot. It doesn't push, it hammers. Gallagher's helmet and oxygen mask didn't fly off. In Baden's own words, they just disappeared. Without his mask, Gallagher tried to breathe. He could not. The air column hit him like a fire hose aimed directly at his face. Inhalation was physically impossible. Both arms were ripped backward and flailed uselessly. His right shoulder sustained catastrophic nerve damage. His left shoulder dislocated and snapped back on its own. He reached for the ejection handles. Neither would move. There was nothing left to do. He looked down through the ruined canopy and saw the top of his pilot's helmet 4 inches below. In his own words, "The wind had become physically and emotionally overwhelming. I was suffocating, and as I felt myself blacking out, all I said was, 'I don't want to die.'" Then, the darkness took him. Mark Baden had 1 second of confusion. He loaded the -G, heard the bang, and looked right, expecting to meet his BN's eyes. Instead, he was looking at a pair of legs. The right side of the canopy was gone. He followed the legs upward and saw the rest of Gallagher's body out in the windblast, head snapping violently, arms torn rearward, completely at the mercy of the air. He watched as the helmet and oxygen mask ceased to exist. He did not freeze. He moved. Throttles to idle, speed brakes out. Every knot of airspeed he shed was 1 fewer pound of force, destroying the man beside him. There was no checklist for this. There was no procedure. There was only the understanding that speed was the one variable he could control, and he controlled it. But the picture in front of him was something no pilot has ever been trained to process. The jagged, fractured rim of the shattered canopy was pointing directly at Gallagher's chest and stomach, sharp as broken crystal, angled inward like blades. Baden understood. If Gallagher's body shifted even slightly forward, those shards would cut through him. He keyed the radio. "Mayday! Mayday! This is 515. My BN has partially ejected." The air boss came up immediately. "Bring it on in." Baden confirmed his heading. The boss asked if the BN was still with the aircraft. Baden's answer was 4 words no one on that frequency had ever heard before. "Only his legs are inside." The carrier was 7 miles out. Baden had to thread an impossible needle, slow enough that the wind wouldn't finish killing his BN, fast enough that the aircraft wouldn't stall and kill them both. Gear down, flaps down, tailhook extended, speed brakes out, the intruder clawing through the air in the most degraded configuration possible. And in his peripheral vision, 4 inches to the right, the legs, still, unmoving. Alive or dead, he could not tell. Then, a twitch, small, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. He was still alive. Bring it on in. The USS Abraham Lincoln was ready. Crash crews staged. Medical teams in position. The flight deck cleared. LSO Lieutenant Commander Mike Manazir took up his position on the platform, the last set of eyes between a returning jet and catastrophe. He had guided hundreds of aircraft to the deck. He had never seen anything that looked like this. On final approach, Lizard 515 defied language. An A-6 Intruder, slow and dirty, every drag device hanging, with a human body protruding from the top of the cockpit and a parachute stretched back toward the tail, visible from half a mile away. Every person on that flight deck who looked up was looking at something that should have been a death notification. Baden aimed for wire 1, touched down short. The hook caught. The jet went from flying to stopped in under 2 seconds, a deceleration violent enough to rattle teeth under normal circumstances. The aircraft stopped. Baden killed the engines, climbed out of his side of the cockpit, and reached over the shattered canopy to the man beside him. He took Gallagher's arm. He waited, and then a voice, weak, confused, completely, impossibly alive. "Am I on the flight deck?" Baden could not speak. The crash crew was already there. 6 minutes. From the bang to the wire. 6 minutes. Keith Gallagher's injuries were severe. Paralyzed right arm, dislocated left shoulder, nerve damage with no name in any aviation manual written before that day. 6 months later, to the day, he flew again. The investigation found a fatigue crack in a single metal latch, invisible, accumulated over years, triggered by one push of the stick. Mark Baden received the Air Medal. The captain of the Abraham Lincoln read a letter from Gallagher's wife over the ship's PA to the entire crew. She thanked them for bringing her husband home. Baden later became a United Airlines captain. Gallagher finished his naval career. Both men went home because one pilot made one decision in 1 second: stay with the aircraft. If this story got to you, hit like and subscribe. We go this deep every week. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were Mark Baden? 1 second. What's your answer?